Highbridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Cherry on Top, Flirty, 40-something, and Funny as Fuck, by Bobbie Brown with Caroline Ryder, read by Bobbie Brown. Dedicated to my supportive, loving family, friends, and fans, thank you for loving me even when I don't love myself. I'm blessed to have you all. Hugs and kisses. Life's a gas. It was around midnight on a Tuesday, and moonlight crept over Arleta, the quiet LA suburb I call home. These days, I sleep alone in my four-poster bed, unless you count Nupa, my 10-year-old chihuahua. After years of sharing me with various male interlopers, Nupa was pleased to finally have me to herself. She lay on the bed, watching me as I gathered clothes from around my bedroom, a little snaggletooth protruding from her lower jaw. During quiet days at home like this one, I'd catch myself thinking about Josh, the musician 16 years younger than myself, with whom I'd spent the last 5 years of my life. An ex-Mormon who worked in construction, Josh had a band whose goals, according to their social media pages, included waking up in the van covered in glitter in front of a church on Easter morning after a long night of swimming in Jack Daniels and getting some strange. Marriage material, if you're me. My daughter Taylor, who is an excellent judge of character, loathed Josh so much. She sent him a bag of dirt for Christmas one year. Yes, Josh had more red flags than a communist parade, but I was blinded by his long brown hair, lazy smile, and slender body, which took me back to a different time in my life. A time when the Sunset Strip still had a pulse. A time when life was a beautiful mess of music, love, and hairspray. I stuffed my dirty laundry in the basket and stomped down the beige-carpeted stairs, scolding myself for missing Josh and swearing I would never again date anyone who was a fan of Motley Crue. In a Motley fan's mind, you see, sleeping with me takes them one step closer to being Tommy Lee, to whom I was engaged many moons ago. Well, guess what? You'll never be Tommy Lee, I fumed, and if you were, I sure as hell wouldn't date you. Distracted by my thoughts, I misjudged a step. My slipper flew off my foot, and I tumbled down the stairs, head first into the corner of a marble side table. Laundry went flying, and there was a thud as I hit the floor, and for one terrifying moment, the whole world turned black. Slowly, I opened my eyes. Psychedelic globes bounced lazily about my field of vision like an old screensaver. Whimpering, I felt for my cell phone in my back pocket of my jeans and dialed my younger brother, Adam, who lived a few blocks away with his wife, Laura, and their baby, Ollie. "Adam, help!" I whispered as Nupa hopped down the stairs and gave me a look of concern. When Adam arrived at my condo, he gasped. I looked like Rocky Balboa after 12 rounds with a meat grinder. He helped me into his car and drove me to the emergency room, urging me to stay awake, promising me that everything was going to be okay. Adam was my lifeline, my only family in Los Angeles. Although I was worried that he and his wife were growing weary of lonely Aunt Bobbie visiting every day, clinging to their newborn infant with tears in her eyes for reasons no one quite understood. At the hospital, the neurologist told me that 50% of people who hit their heads as hard as I did wind up in the morgue. Had the marble table impacted my head just 3 millimeters to the left, it would have ruptured some vital vein whose name escapes me right now, resulting in instant death. I was lucky to be alive, even though my skull ached and indescribable pain and a bump the size of a softball began taking shape on my forehead. "Off topic," said the doctor, "but are you the cherry pie girl?" I nodded, trying not to rattle my tenderized brain. "I thought so," he exclaimed. "Wow, you really were an it girl back then. I had the biggest crush on you." I was an it girl once. Miss Bobbie Brown, Southern pageant queen, runner-up in Miss Teen USA 1987, and for a minute, the hottest girl in the Sunset Strip. Helter-skelter and a summer swelter. I was built for stonewashed jeans and stadium rock, with my long legs, sun-kissed hair, and a smile that lit up rooms. Secretly, I always wished I looked like one of those waifish brunettes, the kind you see on the Paris runway. But the reflection in the mirror confirmed that, in the words of Raymond Chandler, it was a blonde. And in L.A., people want blondes. Casting agents want them, bands want them, men want them. For 15 years, during the peak of my good fortune, I had my pick of rich and famous lovers. When I met Rod Stewart at the Roxbury, he asked me what I wanted. I told him cranberry vodka, and he laughed. No, I meant Ferrari, Porsche, or Jaguar. Strangers would approach me in clubs, offer me $100,000 to spend the night with them. And if only I hadn't been so principled, I might have moved up the property ladder by now. Romance came thick and fast. I spent several coked-up months with Rob from Milli Vanilli, enjoyed dance floor flirtations with Prince, shared intimate moments with a Chippendale in a broom closet, brushed off overtures from O.J. Simpson, spent dreamy nights on ecstasy with Dave Navarro, shared kisses at the Chateau Marmont with Ethan Hawke, and experienced a titanic roll in the hay with Leonardo DiCaprio. We mustn't forget the night I set Kevin Costner's bedroom on fire, literally, nor the strange, chaotic year I spent engaged to my teen idol Tommy Lee, drummer of the most notorious rock band on the Strip, Motley Crue. But it was my marriage to blonde, blue-eyed singer Janie Lane of the hair band Warrant that caused middle-aged neurologists to recognize me in hospitals. You see, in 1990, Janie handpicked me to star in the video for one of the biggest songs of the decade, Cherry Pie, which placed my all-American body on heavy rotation on MTV, VH1, and television screens across the world. Overnight, Janie and I became sweetheart darlings of rock and roll, on and off screen. We were the perfect match. I was the fun-loving, bubblegum-chewing girl of his melancholic dreams, the bombshell who could shock him into laughter. That's the thing, beautiful blondes are everywhere in Hollywood, but try finding one who can make you laugh. On the Howard Stern show, Janie announced to the world that he was going to marry me. His public devotion and chivalry won me over, and after making love on the bullet train in Tokyo, I became pregnant with our baby girl, Taylor Jane Lane. 4 months later, on July 15, 1991, we were married on the rooftop of the Wyndham Village Hotel, the air heavy with the scent of 500 pink roses and several dozen cans of Elnut. All our friends came to the wedding, Guns N' Roses' Duff McKagan, Def Leppard's Rick Allen, and my dance floor buddy, R&B singer Bobbie Brown. Our wedding was a fitting climax to the perfect Sunset Strip fairy tale, even though behind the scenes the cracks in my relationship with Janie were already starting to show, and the Sunset Strip was inching closer and closer to implosion. It didn't matter what the future held, though, because from that day on, my fate was sealed. I would forever be the cherry pie girl. When I came home from the hospital after my tumble down the stairs, I cried like a baby, and not just because I looked like the Elephant Man. It was a slap in the face, a reminder of how unraveled my life had become. I was that old Hollywood cliché, the small-town blonde fallen from grace, her 15 minutes long behind her. Hollywood had made me pay the price for the hubris of my youth. Over and over again, I'd been knocked down, passed over, and dismissed as too old, too fat, too loud, too Bobbie. Blonde hair and a quick wit no longer opened doors for me. In the past 5 years alone, my TV show had been canceled, my agent had dropped me, my body ached because of a traumatic car accident, and I'd endured the most humiliating breakup of my life with Josh, who, it turned out, was secretly sending high-resolution photographs of his dick to every girl in L.A. with a cell phone and a data plan. On top of all of this, wildfires were circling the city, temperatures were rising, the ice caps were melting, and so were my breast implants. Then I heard someone say rock and roll was over. Bye-bye, Miss American Pie, might as well throw yourself down the stairs. For weeks, the bruise bulged out of my head, protruding like a unicorn's horn, a reminder of how alone I was in the world. What if my brother hadn't been there to take me to the hospital? Who could I count on? Most of my immediate family lived far away in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I had no husband, no boyfriend. Yes, I had friends, but friends get busy. My home seemed unsafe, a place where bad things might happen. I trod carefully down the stairs, stopped doing laundry at midnight, and installed a Nest Cam. I felt like a senior citizen with brittle bones and 1 foot in the grave, even though I hadn't even turned 50. Then came yet another blow, one that hit even harder than my fall. My brother told me he was moving, not to another neighborhood, to another planet. Planet Minnesota. I understood the sane, pragmatic reasons why my sane, pragmatic brother was leaving Hollywood. It was expensive now, prohibitively so, and there was no way he could afford to buy or even rent a home fit for raising his family here. Adam, like so many others, was about to become an unwilling economic exile of Los Angeles, whose blushing sunsets have been marred by the shadows of wage stagnation, rent hikes, and social inequality. The American dream was out of reach for Adam in this town, but it could still happen for him in the Midwest. The day before they left, I promised to entertain my nephew while Adam and his wife supervised the movers, who were loading their stuff into trucks. Watching them, I grew emotional. I couldn't stand the thought that this might be the last time in months I'd get to hold my little nephew, I couldn't stop the tears, so I asked my brother if I could go home for an hour to calm myself down. "Of course, Bobbie," he said. I fell asleep crying in my bed and woke up 2 hours later to messages from Adam's wife, Laura. They'd had to leave already and were checking into a hotel by the airport. I begged for one last dinner together with them, like we always did every Sunday. But it was too late. Ollie was asleep. They promised to text me in the morning and arranged to meet so we could say goodbye in person. But in the end, there was no time, and I didn't get to hug my brother or Laura, or worst of all, my nephew. I so wanted to tell them that his auntie loved him very much, and he brought joy to my world, and I felt alive playing with him, enjoying his perfect little soul. I didn't get to say any of that. After they left, I looked at myself in the mirror, at the dent in my forehead, a permanent reminder of the night I fell. That incident had felt like a fork in the road, yet months later, here I was, still lingering at the crossroads, unsure of which way to go. My brother's departure felt like another prod from above. "Why are you still in Los Angeles, Bobbie Brown? What are you doing here? What's your purpose? Should I go back to Baton Rouge? Follow my brother to Minnesota? Should I just remain a widowed bride of Los Angeles until the day I die?" The city had once felt so full of promise to me. At 21, I walked the Strip like it was my own personal catwalk. At 48, with a dent in my head and enough baggage to fill a cross-country freight train, it seemed like maybe it was finally time to pack up my hair extensions and call it a day. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I hated what I saw. A fallen starlet whose life looked like a huge long joke. I was a promising career littered with fumbled opportunities, a love life where each lapse of judgment was grander and more ridiculous than the last. It was a bad punchline after bad punchline, and I'd had enough. "You're not a joke, Bobbie. You're not a joke," I told my reflection firmly. Then it hit me. I'd been seeing it all wrong. I am a joke. A really, really funny one. I just never gotten around to telling it. Funnily enough, in 1995, Tommy Lee got high on ecstasy and married Pamela Anderson on the beach in Cancun 4 days after he and I called off our engagement. That's when I first considered pursuing comedy professionally. I'd always been known as a funny girl. In high school, the teachers would put my desk in the hallway to keep me from distracting the class with my wisecracks. My mom, Judy, always said to me, "You can turn a dumpy day into sunshine, Bobbie." And Cherise Neal, ex-wife of Motley Crue singer Vince Neil and my ride-or-die bestie for nearly 30 years, had been telling me for ages I should give comedy a go. "Yes, you're beautiful," she once told me, "but you also talk about diarrhea in a really funny way." Cherise thought I should star in rom-coms or have a sitcom like Seinfeld. In the early 2000s, thanks to the encouragement of my loved ones, I finally drummed up the courage to audition for the Groundlings, one of the best improv schools in the world. And to my surprise, they loved me. I nailed the audition. I couldn't believe it. At the time, I was dating Jay Gordon, singer of the industrial band Orgy. Jay had spiky hair, wore cyber-goth platform boots, and shaved his eyebrows. Taylor, who was around 8 years old at the time, refused to be seen with Jay in public. She called him Frankenscissors, because to her he looked like a cross between Frankenstein and Edward Scissorhands. She thought Jay was a dork, but as usual, I was utterly impervious to her good advice. "Jay, I auditioned for the Groundlings, and I got in," I told him when I got home, so proud to have been accepted. Jay looked at me bored. He was always looking bored. "But you're not funny, Bobbie." "I'm not?" "Nope." "He's right," whispered the voice in my head. "You're just some dumb blonde who can't keep a man. What's funny about that?" I never went back to the Groundlings. Self-sabotage is a career choice, too. In 2015, I tried once again, gingerly, to explore the idea of being funny for money. I went to the Comedy Store where a few friends were doing stand-up. After the show, I asked their advice on breaking in, and the responses were overwhelmingly negative. "Don't do it, Bobbie. This is a really hard field to get into," etc. I didn't have to read too far between the lines to understand what they were saying. I was too old to hack it. It was too late in the game. I was already in my mid-40s, and my chances of failure were 100%. But there's nothing like a near-fatal fall down the stairs to kickstart your career goals. I no longer cared that Jay Frankenscissors Gordon didn't think I was funny. I didn't care that comedy was a tough field to get into, or that I was older than most people starting out on that stage. This time, I was giving comedy a shot. I called Jared Zavostosky, an actor, male dating coach, and comedian, who had interviewed me on his podcast, Modern Male Radio, several times. I told him I'd been thinking about trying stand-up comedy and asked if he could give me any pointers. He invited me to accompany him to a comedy class in Hollywood and see what I thought. His teacher was a man called Jimmy Shin, a booker at the Comedy Store and the Hollywood Improv, sort of like the Yoda of the comedy strip. He and his teaching partner, Gary Robinson, are known for helping aspiring comedians break into the game. Jared showed me into the class. "Everyone, this is Bobbie Brown, the cherry pie girl." I rolled my eyes. Something about being introduced as the cherry pie girl makes me feel uncomfortable, like I'm supposed to leap into character and do a little dance. "Pleased to meet you," I said, shaking Jimmy's hand, feeling all the eyes in the room upon me. "I'm glad you're here, Bobbie," said Jimmy, kind and supportive right away. He told me the reason he had started the class was to find new talent and bring that talent into the clubs he booked. Most of his students came to him through referrals. "The fact that you're here means you're already funny, Bobbie," he said reassuringly. "All you need is a little help." Jared had told me to bring some setup ideas or premises for jokes. Premise, tagline, punchline. That's the way a joke is broken down. I knew that already, so I'd prepared a few setup ideas about my dating life, which is, at its core, quite laughable. And with the class's help, I figured out some pretty good punchlines. I like this comedy world with its peculiar language and passionate community. And did you know that comedy groupies are called chuckle fuckers? I wondered if one day, in the distant future, I too would have some chuckle fuckers of my own lining up outside the stage door, hopeful for a kiss. I mean, it's got to be better than Tinder, right? As the class progressed, I shed my inhibitions. My stories grew wilder and more crass as I dug deep into my imagination, ad-libbing about disastrous, quasi-revolting dating scenarios that had my classmates laughing, but also probably wondering if I needed psychological help. I didn't let myself worry about being judged, though. That's what held me back all those years. From now on, I was going to be all me all the time. Afterward, Jimmy pulled me aside for a chat. "Well, you're a natural," he said. "I am?" "Yes. All you have to do is talk, and it's funny. Have you thought about breaking down parts of your life story and putting that into your stand-up? You know, all the guys at the Sunset Strip, the juice?" I wasn't so sure about that. Telling stories about my past, my heartbreaks, my addictions, my failures, that didn't seem too funny to me. I told Jimmy that for now I'd stick to my jokes about awkward dates with strange imaginary men. During my third class, Jimmy dropped a bombshell. "You're ready," he said. I didn't understand what he meant. "To perform," he said, "at the Comedy Store." "What? Hell no!" Was he nuts? Even Jared seemed surprised. There are secrets, theories, and techniques to comedy, things to practice and perfect. 2 weeks in, how the fuck could he think I was ready to get on stage under a spotlight in front of a paying audience? I shook my head. Nope, too soon. "Bobbie, trust me, you can do this," Jimmy said, getting his phone out and typing a message. "There, you're on the schedule. Comedy Store, Friday night, be there." If you've ever cruised along the strip's 2.5 miles, you'll know it has two beating hearts, the rock and roll strip and the comedy strip. The rock section comprised the Roxy, the Rainbow Bar and Grill, and the Whiskey A Go-Go. It was the stomping ground of the Doors and Led Zeppelin in the 60s, the New York Dolls and the Stooges in the 70s, and glam metal bands like Quiet Riot, Motley Crue, Rat, LA Guns, and Warrant in the 80s. But then something happened. Alongside the cute long-haired boys in denim and leather, young comedians were building a scene of their own just a few feet down the street at the Laugh Factory and the iconic Comedy Store, which was run by the late, great Mitzi Shore, mother of Pauly Shore. Under her stewardship, the Comedy Store became a training ground for stars like Robin Williams, Eddie Murphy, Jim Carrey, Richard Pryor, Whoopi Goldberg, Sam Kinison, Dave Chappelle, Roseanne Barr, Andy Kaufman. All of them and their chuckle fuckers were out there rubbing shoulders with the wild-haired guitar guys and their groupies on the strip. Rock and roll and laughter, the two opposite sides of the Sunset Strip coin. Although, in the 21st century, it seems like comedy has overtaken rock and roll as the big ticket. These days, there are bigger crowds lined up to hear the comedians than the guys with the guitars. On the day of my first comedy show, a strange pall hung over Hollywood, some portent of rain. I was exhausted. The night before, I'd sat in my bedroom writing jokes until dawn, scrambling for ideas, praying to the omnipotent comedy goddess in the clouds. These would be the first jokes I would ever tell in public, on a stage. And not just any stage, the stage. So they had better be good. As dawn broke, I dug into the deepest crevices of my psyche, searching for the little gold nuggets of comedy glimmering in the psychic mud, the jokes that would reintroduce me to the world and help me believe I still had a reason to be here. I turned onto Selma Avenue and gasped at what I saw. Tent after tent after tent, a sprawling homeless encampment, upturned shopping carts, a man urinating, another buying drugs in plain view. This wasn't a favela, a refugee camp, or a slum. This was Hollywood, yards away from the Walk of Fame. It had turned into the gates of hell for these people. I drove by feeling guilty about my problems, which suddenly seemed so trivial in the face of this crisis. What had happened? This town used to be so different. You could be an artist with no money and still make something happen, still have some place to live. These days, either you're broke or you're rich. After seeing what was happening here, I was worried about the future. God, I wish I could have saved some money, been smarter. I might have felt more secure had I fallen for Rod Stewart instead of a broke millennial with a dick pic habit. Hindsight's 2020. I arrived at the Comedy Store and I looked at the lineup for the belly room. Normally, rookies are put on the bill way early or way late, but they'd scheduled me to perform right before the headliner, a peak comedy time, when the room would be packed and expectations would be the highest. Shit! Backstage, I saw Jimmy. He could tell I was on the verge of a meltdown. Don't worry, Bobbie, nerves are normal. You'd have to check your pulse if you didn't feel some anxiety about facing a bunch of strangers and having to make them laugh. Thanks, Jimmy. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Guess what? Show is sold out because of you. It is? Yeah, he said. People want you to win, Bobbie. Do you want to win? I heard the MC call my name. Best-selling author, cherry pie girl, 90s babe, and reality TV star Bobbie Brown, on stage for the first time ever. I walked over to the mic, aware of the frantic pounding inside my ribcage. First, I'll hit them with the one about the scary blowjob, then the bit about my mom screaming into the parking lot, and then I'll close with the thing about the butt parasites. I looked at the crowd. They were clapping and smiling. Jimmy was right. They did want me to win. Hello, everyone, I said. I'm Bobbie Brown, and I'm no longer following my heart because, God, that bitch gives bad directions. All seemed to be going well. Then a few jokes in, something very strange happened to me. It felt like I evaporated, left my body somehow. Physically, I was there, telling stories and making people laugh, because there's video footage confirming that. But in that moment, my consciousness just sort of left the building, rising up like a helium balloon far above Los Angeles. Finally, I understood the blank, stunned look you sometimes see on young comedians' faces, the equivalent of a "be back soon" sign on a shop window. It's the look that means I'm so fucking scared I vacated my body. I'd only ever experienced that feeling once before. On the 134, as my car spun out of control, I left my body and only vaguely heard my own voice screaming, "No, not now!" Suddenly, I zoomed back to Earth, aware that I was on stage at the Comedy Store with a lot of people sitting in front of me laughing. I wondered if anyone had noticed that I'd temporarily left the planet. I wound up the joke, thanked the audience, and ran off stage where Jimmy was waiting for me. You still had a few minutes of time, Bobbie. Why did you come off early? I looked at him, feeling a little spooked. Something weird happened to me out there, Jimmy. I lost all sense of time and space. Jimmy nodded. You blacked out. Happens all the time. It's the adrenaline. Oh. I exhaled, glad that my temporary delirium was nothing out of the ordinary. I asked him if he could tell if I wasn't quite in the room the whole time, and he shrugged. Well, you did have a bit of a strange look on your face, he said, like surprised, and your movements were kind of jerky, like you were trying to restrain the mic. But don't worry, Bobbie, you were good, really good. I nodded, taking his word for it as the beautiful realization dawned. After all these years of talking about it, I'd finally popped my comedy cherry. Out of the vortex, into the hole. Looking back on the story of your life, it's funny discerning the high points from the low, connecting the dots and realizing how the tiniest decisions can lead to such cataclysmic shifts in fortunes. People talk about rock bottoms, and mine came after Tommy and I split in 1995. It lasted a solid 10 years, during which time I went from it girl to shit girl, as crystal meth pulled me into its horrible white vortex. People ask me how I stopped after such a long period of addiction, and I tell them the truth. It's an ongoing battle. I can't say there aren't times when I fall off the wagon. Usually it happens when I feel pain, when I can't handle my feelings. Using drugs is rarely celebratory for me, you see. I use them because I hurt. That's why I have to be really careful about getting close to people who are bad for me. When I do, I'm literally toying with my life. Because when people let me down, I self-destruct. The difference now is that if I find myself dipping back in, it doesn't last long. My lifestyle is different from what it was 20 years ago. I'm not modeling. I don't go to clubs or bars. I don't feel pressure to be stick thin. I'm not in a place to easily adopt a heavy drug user's lifestyle. Besides, I have bigger fish to fry. That said, even after I pulled myself out of the darkest phase of my addiction, I was still lost, still hiding myself in bad love, still wasting time and avoiding doing the work that my talents required of me. I kept my dreams in a box for many years, too frightened to let them out in case no one believed in them. But dreams don't like being boxed. They'll start making noise if you keep them locked up for too long. In 2015, I was driving on the 134 heading toward downtown LA and cruising in my cute stick-shift 2006 Pontiac Solstice convertible. I must have been going 70 when all of a sudden my car jerked violently to the right. Something must have hit me from the left. Why else would my car veer like that? I started spinning backward toward the median in big circles really fast. I gripped the steering wheel, helpless. Time warped as the whole world turned into a terrifying slow-motion horror movie. This was it, the end. Minutes, hours could have passed as my car spun. I closed my eyes and screamed, "No, not now!" Then my car slammed into the middle divider between the two sides of the freeway. I should have been dead. For a second, I thought I was. Only the pain convinced me that I wasn't. I saw a man's face pressed up against my window. He yanked open the driver's side door and asked me, "Are you okay?" "No," I said. All the bones on my right side felt broken, as did my left arm and wrist. But I was alive. Something must have heard me scream. I noticed another man standing by his car on the other side of the freeway. Panic welled inside me. Did I hit him? Did he hit me? Is he okay? What happened? "He's fine," said the stranger, helping me out of my car. "I saw what happened. Your vehicle just lost control. Nobody hit anyone." I asked this kind man to call Josh. Things were good between us then. We knew our respective roles in the relationship, and our dysfunctions were largely compatible. Romantic codependence had helped us avoid the individual work we needed to do to progress in our own lives, and as far as toxic fantasies went, it worked pretty well. I was the breadwinner, the caretaker, the initiator, the aggressor. I was me on steroids, fulfilling the role of the man of the house, with the pet who adored me. And I don't mean Nupa. It was a devil's bargain, of course. The balance of power and love is a delicate thing, and I had yet to grasp just how devastating it is when one partner cultivates weakness in the other, knowingly or otherwise. An ambulance arrived, as did the police, who examined the scene and concluded I was lucky to be alive. My health insurance didn't cover transportation to the emergency room, and I couldn't afford a $1,000 ambulance ride, so Josh drove me to the hospital in the worst pain I had ever experienced. My wrist, my arm, and all of my ribs were broken. I was sent home with a cast on my arm and a pair of crutches. For months I couldn't cough, get up, adjust myself, or turn my head without whimpering in pain. Worst of all, I couldn't laugh. For months after the accident, every day was the same. Wake up, eat, take more sleep and pain pills, and go right back to sleep. When I was finally able to move around by myself, I kept getting stuck. If I squatted down to pick something up off the floor, chances were that I wasn't getting back up. More than once, Josh came home to find me stuck on the floor of my closet sobbing. For someone like me, so used to being independent, large and in charge, immobility was the cruelest monster I'd ever met. As the weeks stretched into months, the strain began to wear on me and Josh. I'd always been responsible for the bills, but now I couldn't work. He had just lost his job. The physiotherapy and healthcare bills were mounting, and all the money I had earned in my 3 years on Ex-Wives of Rock and from my first book, Dirty Rocker Boys, was being swallowed up by the costs of getting me back on my feet. Welcome to American healthcare, a black hole designed to consume every last dime in your savings account. The police report came back. Because there was no proof that I had been hit, they decided that the accident must have been caused by negligence on my part, which meant my car insurer was under no obligation to cover any of my costs. I called my insurer in tears. We went back and forth until finally they agreed to give me money for the totaled car, but nothing toward my health care. One day I was on my computer and a pop-up appeared. If you have a GM car and have been in an accident, click here. I clicked on the link and learned that General Motors, which owned Pontiac, was being sued for billions and was recalling certain vehicles with a 2003 to 2007.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?